The story begins in a large city where money decided comfort and comfort decided confidence. And in this city lived a man named Adrian Hale, a self-made millionaire known for his sharp suits and sharper tongue. He owned a private social club where business leaders gathered to relax, drink coffee, and enjoy live music in the evenings. For Adrian, the club was not just a place to unwind, but a stage where his success could be seen and admired by everyone who walked through the doors. He believed talent was expensive and opportunity was reserved for those who could afford it. Every evening, the club staff moved quietly around the guests, cleaning tables, polishing floors, and making sure nothing disturbed the wealthy crowd. Among them was a woman named Rosa who worked as a cleaner. She arrived before sunset and left long after midnight, her back often aching but her spirit strong. Rosa rarely spoke unless spoken to, and most people barely noticed her presence. She needed the job badly because at home she had a small apartment, unpaid bills, and a daughter who depended on her completely. Rosa's daughter Lena was 17 years old and gifted with music in a way that felt rare and natural. She could sit at an old keyboard at home and make melodies that sounded like hope and sorrow mixed together. Music was the one place where Lena felt free. Her father had passed away years earlier, and her mother's income barely covered rent and food. Lessons were impossible to afford, but Lena learned by listening, practicing, and believing that music could one day change their lives. Lena's mother had recently fallen ill, not seriously at first, but enough to keep her in bed and away from work for several days. Rosa pushed herself harder, taking extra shifts, afraid that missing even one night would cost her job. Lena watched her mother struggle and felt helpless. She wanted to help but had nothing to offer except her music. One night while waiting for her mother outside the club, Lena heard the sound of a grand piano coming from inside. The player made mistakes, and the music felt empty to her ears. That night something inside Lena shifted. She knew she could play better, not to show off, but to earn money, even a small amount, to help her mother rest and recover. Over the next few days she gathered courage, watching how musicians entered the club and how the manager spoke to them. She practiced every spare moment, even when her fingers hurt, holding on to the thought that this might be her only chance. On a quiet evening, Lena followed her mother into the club for the first time. She stayed near the wall, careful not to get in the way. The piano stood under soft lights, untouched, waiting for the scheduled musician who had not yet arrived. Adrian sat nearby with his friends, laughing loudly and speaking about deals and vacations. Lena watched him from a distance, unaware of his reputation, seeing only a man who controlled the room. When the manager announced that the musician was delayed, the mood shifted slightly. Some guests complained, others checked their phones. Lena felt her heart racing. She looked at her mother, pale and tired, wiping tables with slow movements. In that moment, Lena made a decision that scared her more than anything she had ever done. She walked toward the piano, her hands trembling, and asked softly if she could play for a few minutes. The room went quiet, then filled with laughter from one corner. Adrian looked up, amused and curious. He saw a young girl in simple clothes standing too straight, eyes full of determination. He smirked and asked why he should allow that. Lena answered honestly, saying she wanted to play to help her sick mother. Adrian laughed, not loudly but enough to sting, and waved his hand as if brushing away dust. He believed talent came with polish and polish came with money. Rosa froze when she saw her daughter standing there, fear and pride battling inside her. She wanted to pull Lena away but also wanted someone to finally listen to her child. The guests watched, some uncomfortable, others entertained. Adrian leaned back in his chair, confident that the girl would embarrass herself, unaware that this moment was about to change more than one life. And this was only the beginning. The silence in the room felt heavier than before, and Lena stood still beside the piano waiting for permission that did not come easily. Adrian's laughter faded, but the smile on his face stayed, the kind that carried disbelief rather than kindness. He looked around at his friends as if inviting them to share the joke, and a few of them nodded with amusement. To them, the moment was entertainment, nothing more than a brief distraction in an expensive evening. The manager hesitated, caught between respecting the owner and calming the guests. He glanced at the empty piano and then at the girl who refused to lower her eyes. Something about her stillness unsettled him. Before he could speak, Adrian lifted his hand and told her she could try, his voice casual and careless, adding that it would be interesting to see what passion without training sounded like. The words cut quietly through the room and reached Rosa like a blade. Rosa wanted to stop everything. She stepped forward, shaking her head slightly, silently asking her daughter to return to her side. Lena saw her mother's fear, and for a moment doubt rushed in. Her chest tightened and her hands felt numb. She thought about the nights she had listened to her mother cough in the dark, about the unpaid bills on the table, about how small their world had become. She inhaled deeply and sat at the piano before fear could pull her away. The bench felt cold beneath her. She placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes, not to block the room but to find the place where music lived inside her. At first there was only silence. A few guests shifted in their seats and someone cleared their throat. Adrian leaned forward slightly, expecting a mistake, a wrong note, a reason to laugh again. Then Lena played the first chord and the sound was full and steady. It was not loud or dramatic, but it carried weight. The melody that followed was simple yet honest, shaped by long nights of practice and quiet hope. It did not try to impress, it tried to speak. The room changed slowly as if the air itself was listening. Rosa stopped moving and held a cloth in her hands, tears forming without her noticing. She had heard her daughter play at home many times, but never like this. There was something stronger in the music now, something born from need and courage. The guests began to turn in their chairs, conversations fading away. Glasses were set down, phones forgotten. Adrian's smile disappeared. He did not sit back again. His eyes stayed fixed on Lena, his expression unreadable. The music reminded him of something he could not name, something he had buried long ago under success and control. He felt annoyed by the feeling and tried to shake it off, telling himself it was only surprise. Lena continued to play, her fingers moving with confidence she did not know she possessed. Each note carried a piece of her story, the loss of her father, the strength of her mother, the fear of tomorrow. She did not see the room anymore. She played as if speaking directly to the one person who needed to hear it most, even if she did not know who that was. When the final chord faded, the silence returned, but it was different now. No one laughed, no one spoke. A few guests exchanged looks, unsure how to react. Then one person began to clap slowly and uncertainly. Another followed, then another, until the room filled with applause that felt real and unplanned. Rosa covered her mouth, overwhelmed, pride and relief washing over her. Lena opened her eyes and stood up, her legs weak. She looked at her mother first, then at the room, then finally at Adrian. He did not clap at first. He studied her, his mind working quickly, measuring what he had just seen against everything he believed. Adrian stood up and the applause faded again. He walked toward the piano, every step controlled. Lena felt her stomach twist, unsure if she had crossed a line she could not return from. Adrian stopped in front of her and asked where she learned to play. Lena answered honestly, saying she taught herself and practiced whenever she could. He nodded slowly and said nothing more. Then he turned to the manager and told him to pay the girl for the performance, more than what the scheduled musician would have earned. Murmurs spread through the room. Rosa felt dizzy, unable to understand what was happening. Lena tried to thank him, but he had already turned away. As Adrian returned to his seat, he told his friends the evening had improved after all, his tone light but his thoughts restless. He did not look at Lena again that night, but something had shifted inside him, something uncomfortable and unfamiliar. Lena and her mother left the club later than usual, walking home under quiet streetlights, carrying money they desperately needed and a feeling neither of them could yet explain. Neither knew that this was not a simple one-time moment, but the beginning of a path that would test pride, kindness, and the true cost of believing in someone who had been invisible for far too long. The days after that night felt unreal for Lena and her mother. The money from the performance helped pay for medicine and groceries, and Rosa was able to rest for the first time in weeks. But the memory of the club stayed alive in Lena's mind, not because of the applause, but because of the way the room had changed when she played. She wondered if that change could happen again, or if it had been a rare moment that would never return. Rosa returned to work at the club with mixed emotions. She was grateful but also afraid that Lena's bold action might cost her job. She kept her head down more than ever, moving quietly, avoiding Adrian's gaze whenever he appeared. But to her surprise, no one mentioned that night. The staff treated her the same, and the manager simply nodded at her as if nothing unusual had happened. Adrian, on the other hand, could not forget the music. He told himself it was a coincidence, that talent without discipline fades quickly. Yet he found himself distracted during meetings, tapping his fingers on the table in patterns that reminded him of Lena's melody. He felt irritated by his own thoughts. He had built his life on control and certainty, and that performance had challenged both. One evening, Adrian asked the manager about the girl, pretending it was casual curiosity. The manager explained that she was the cleaner's daughter and that she had never played professionally before. Adrian listened without reacting, but the information stayed with him. The idea that something so refined could come from such a modest place unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. At home, Lena continued to practice. Now with a new kind of pressure, she was no longer playing only for herself. She was playing for the possibility that someone might listen again. She worried that she would not be able to repeat what she had done. That fear sat beside her every time she touched the keys, yet she kept going, because stopping felt worse than failing. Rosa noticed the change in her daughter. Lena was quieter, more focused, carrying both hope and fear in her eyes. Rosa wanted to protect her from disappointment, but she also knew she could not take this dream away. Instead, she supported her in small ways, making sure the house stayed calm during practice, saving small amounts of money whenever possible. A week later, the club announced a charity evening, a public event meant to improve the club's image. Musicians were scheduled, donors invited, and speeches prepared. Adrian planned it carefully, seeing it as another strategic move. But as the date approached, he made an unexpected decision. He told the manager to invite Lena to play one piece during the event, not as a favor but as a test. He wanted to see if the first performance had been luck or something real. When the manager told Rosa, she froze, fear returning stronger than before. The stakes felt higher now. This was not a quiet evening with distracted guests. This was a room full of important people. Lena listened silently, her hands clenched, her heart racing. Part of her wanted to say no, but another part knew this might be the only door that would ever open. She agreed to play. In the days leading up to the event, Lena practiced more than ever. Her fingers ached, her sleep grew lighter, and doubt followed her everywhere. She imagined the room judging her, comparing her, waiting for her to fail, yet beneath the fear there was determination. She reminded herself why she started: for her mother, for survival, for the voice inside her that refused to be quiet. Adrian watched the preparations from a distance, telling himself this was only curiosity, but deep down he was preparing for something he could not yet name. The charity night approached, carrying expectations for everyone involved, and none of them knew that this evening would draw clear lines between who they were and who they were about to become. The night of the charity event arrived with polished floors, carefully arranged lights, and guests dressed in confidence and expensive fabric. The club felt different from usual, more formal and less forgiving. Lena arrived early with her mother, her simple dress pressed carefully, her hair tied back neatly. She looked out of place among the elegance, and she felt it in every step she took. Rosa stayed close, whispering reassurance even though her own hands shook. Backstage, there was a small waiting area where the scheduled musicians warmed up. They glanced at Lena with mild curiosity, some polite, some dismissive. No one spoke to her. She sat quietly on a chair, hands folded, breathing slowly, repeating the opening notes in her mind. She could hear the murmur of the crowd through the walls, the sound of glasses clinking, the low hum of important conversations. Adrian stood near the entrance, greeting donors and partners, playing his role perfectly. He looked calm and in control, but his eyes searched the room more often than necessary. When he finally spotted Lena sitting alone, a brief hesitation passed through him. For a moment he wondered if he had made a mistake. He pushed the thought aside and reminded himself that this was exactly why he had invited her. When the program began, the performances followed one another smoothly. The musicians were skilled, their music polished and predictable. The audience listened politely, applauding at the right moments. Lena's name appeared near the end of the list, and as her turn approached, her chest tightened. Rosa squeezed her hand gently before stepping back into the shadows. The host announced Lena without emphasis, describing her as a special guest. As she walked onto the stage, the room quieted in a different way than before. Some guests recognized her from the previous week, others noticed her youth and simple appearance. Adrian took his seat in the front, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. Lena sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. The lights felt warm on her skin, but the room beyond them felt distant and cold. She closed her eyes and thought of her mother, of the nights filled with worry, of the first time she had touched a keyboard. She began to play. This time the music was stronger, more confident. It flowed with purpose, carrying both struggle and resilience. The melody rose and fell naturally, drawing the audience in without effort. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The room leaned into the sound. Lena did not rush or hesitate. She trusted herself in a way she never had before. Rosa watched from the side, tears streaming freely now. She saw not just her daughter playing music, but her daughter claiming space in a world that had never offered it. The guests listened intently, some surprised, some deeply moved. A few exchanged glances, recognizing something rare. Adrian felt the shift again, stronger than before. This was no accident. This was talent shaped by truth. He felt pride, but also something close to shame, remembering his first reaction to her. The applause came before the final note had fully faded, louder and longer than any performance that night. Lena stood and bowed awkwardly, overwhelmed. As she left the stage, people whispered her name. The manager approached her immediately, congratulating her, telling her several guests had asked about her. Rosa hugged her tightly, both of them shaking with emotion. Adrian did not approach her right away. He waited, watching how others responded, how Lena carried herself, humble and unsure. Later that evening, after the crowd thinned, he finally spoke to her. He told her she had something rare and asked if she had ever considered formal training. Lena answered honestly, saying she dreamed of it but could not afford it. Adrian nodded slowly. He said nothing more that night, but the look in his eyes was serious, thoughtful. The charity event ended successfully, praised by guests and donors, but for Adrian and Lena, it marked a turning point. The distance between them had changed, and the choices that followed would no longer be simple or comfortable. In the days after the charity event, life did not suddenly become easier for Lena and her mother. But it felt different, as if a door had been unlocked even though no one had stepped through it yet. Rosa returned to her routine at the club, cleaning the same floors and tables, but now people greeted her more often and some even asked about her daughter. The attention made her uncomfortable, yet she could not deny the quiet pride growing inside her. Lena stayed at home practicing, replaying the performance in her mind, wondering what it had truly meant. She had not heard from Adrian or the club since that night, and the silence fed her doubts. She reminded herself that applause did not guarantee opportunity. Still, she practiced with greater focus, determined not to lose whatever momentum she had found. Adrian struggled with his own thoughts. He had built his success by trusting logic and control, yet Lena's presence had disrupted both. He reviewed numbers and contracts, but his mind drifted back to the piano. He questioned his own instincts for the first time in years. He also noticed something else that unsettled him: the way others now associated his club with a young girl's raw talent rather than luxury alone. One afternoon, Adrian asked the manager to bring Lena and her mother to his office after closing hours. The request filled Rosa with fear, memories of insecurity rising quickly. Lena felt the same fear but also a sense of resolve. They arrived together, sitting stiffly across from Adrian's large desk. He studied them quietly before speaking. He asked Lena about her life, her practice, her dreams. His tone was direct but no longer dismissive. Lena answered honestly, speaking of her father, her mother's illness, and her desire to learn music properly. Rosa listened silently, hands folded tightly in her lap. When Adrian asked about finances, Rosa admitted they barely managed to get by. Adrian leaned back, thinking carefully. He said he believed Lena deserved a chance but not charity. He offered to sponsor her formal training, covering lessons and access to better instruments, in exchange for her performing occasionally at the club. The arrangement was presented like a business decision, but beneath it was something else, an attempt to correct a mistake without admitting it. The offer left the room silent. Lena felt overwhelmed, unsure how to respond. Rosa's eyes filled with tears, gratitude, and fear mixing together. Rosa worried about strings attached, about power and control, but she also knew this opportunity might never come again. Lena asked for time to think, surprising Adrian with her calm courage. That night, Lena and her mother talked for hours. They discussed risks, trust, and the fear of owing someone who once laughed at her. Lena admitted she was scared, but she also felt that saying no would mean turning away from her own future. Rosa told her daughter that dignity mattered more than comfort, but that accepting help was not the same as losing pride. The next day, Lena returned to the club alone. She told Adrian she accepted the offer, but only if her education remained hers and her performances were by choice, not obligation. Adrian listened carefully, then agreed, impressed by her clarity. For the first time, he smiled at her without irony. The arrangement began quietly. Lena started attending lessons at a modest music academy. She struggled at first, learning discipline and theory she had never known, but she adapted quickly. Each day challenged her, reshaping her talent into skill. Rosa watched her daughter grow more confident, her illness slowly improving as stress eased. Adrian attended one of Lena's lessons without announcing himself. He listened from the back, observing her focus and humility. He felt something he had not felt in a long time, respect not for status or wealth, but for effort and growth. He began to understand that success measured only by money was incomplete, and this realization unsettled and inspired him at the same time. As the months passed, Lena's life settled into a demanding rhythm that tested her strength and patience. She balanced school, music lessons, and occasional performances at the club, often returning home exhausted but fulfilled. The structure of formal training challenged her in ways she had never experienced. She learned that talent alone was not enough, and that discipline required sacrifice. There were days she doubted herself, moments when the weight of expectations felt heavy, but she kept going. Rosa's health continued to improve, slowly but steadily. With less pressure to work every possible shift, she began to heal, both physically and emotionally. Watching her daughter pursue something meaningful brought her quiet joy. She remained cautious, never forgetting how fragile their situation was, but hope now lived beside that caution. Adrian noticed changes in himself as well. He found reasons to attend Lena's performances, sitting quietly among the guests rather than commanding the room. He listened more than he spoke. His conversations shifted, less about control and more about curiosity. He even began mentoring young musicians through small programs at the club. something he would have dismissed as unnecessary in the past. Not everyone welcomed Lena's progress. Some professional musicians at the club felt threatened, whispering that she was only there because of pity or favor. Lena sensed the tension but chose not to respond. She focused on improvement, letting her work speak for her. Adrian became aware of the resentment and made it clear that standards applied equally to everyone, protecting Lena without special treatment. The real test came when the club planned a high-profile anniversary event. A renowned pianist was scheduled, but days before the event he canceled unexpectedly. The manager suggested replacing him with another known professional, but Adrian paused. He thought of Lena. He knew the risk. Placing her in such a spotlight could either elevate her or expose her limits. Adrian asked Lena if she would consider performing as the main act. The question stunned her. Fear rose immediately. This was different from previous performances. This would define how people truly saw her. She asked for time to decide. That night she barely slept, torn between ambition and fear of failure. Rosa reminded her that growth often arrived disguised as fear. She told Lena that no matter the outcome, her worth did not depend on applause. That grounded her. The next day Lena accepted the challenge, knowing she might fall but choosing not to hide. Preparation consumed her. She practiced relentlessly, refining every detail, learning to control nerves as much as technique. Her instructor pushed her harder than ever, sensing the importance of the moment. Lena's hands ached, her mind raced, but her focus sharpened. The night of the anniversary event arrived. The club was filled with influential guests and critics. Lena stepped onto the stage feeling exposed and small. Adrian watched closely, aware that his decision would reflect on both of them. As Lena began to play, the room grew silent. The performance was not perfect. There were moments of tension, notes that wavered slightly. But there was honesty, strength, and a depth that held the audience. The music carried her journey, her struggle, her resilience. When she finished, the applause was not explosive but steady and sincere. Critics later described her performance as raw and promising. Offers for small concerts and collaborations followed. Lena's name began to circulate quietly but respectfully. Adrian felt relief and pride, but also humility. He realized he had not created her success, only stepped aside enough for it to happen. He had not created her success, only stepped aside enough for it to happen. For Lena, the event marked a shift from being a hidden talent to a recognized one. For Adrian, it marked another shift, a deeper understanding that true influence came from opening doors rather than guarding them. Both stood at new beginnings, aware that growth did not erase struggle but gave it meaning. With recognition came new pressures that Lena had never imagined. Invitations arrived from small venues and local events, each offering modest pay and exposure. She learned quickly that opportunity often arrived wrapped in uncertainty. Some offers were genuine, others careless, and a few carried expectations that made her uncomfortable. With guidance from her instructor and support from her mother, she learned to say no when needed, protecting her growth rather than chasing every chance. Rosa watched her daughter navigate this new world with pride and concern. She reminded Lena often that success could change people's behavior, but it did not have to change her values. Their bond grew stronger as they faced each decision together. The apartment that once felt heavy with worry now felt lighter, filled with plans instead of fear. Adrian also faced challenges. Some of his business partners questioned his focus, suggesting that supporting a young musician from a cleaning woman's family distracted from the club's image. Adrian listened, but for once he did not adjust himself to please others. He defended his choices calmly, realizing that leadership required conviction, not approval. The relationship between Adrian and Lena evolved into one built on respect rather than power. He no longer positioned himself as a benefactor, but as someone who believed in accountability and growth. Lena, in turn, no longer feared his judgment. She saw him as a complicated man learning to unlearn his own limits. A turning point came when Lena was invited to audition for a regional music scholarship, one that could open doors far beyond the city. The application required a recommendation. Her instructor offered one immediately, but Lena hesitated, then asked Adrian as well. The request surprised him. He understood the weight of that trust and took it seriously. Adrian wrote honestly about her talent and work ethic, but he also reflected on her humility and resilience. In writing the letter, he confronted his own past behavior and how close he had come to overlooking something extraordinary. The process felt like a quiet apology, though it was never spoken aloud. The audition was held in a large hall far from home. Lena and Rosa traveled together, nerves high but hope present. Lena performed with controlled emotion, not trying to prove herself, but to express who she had become. The judges listened carefully, asking questions about her journey and her goals. Weeks passed before the result arrived. When the letter finally came, Lena opened it with shaking hands. She had been awarded the scholarship. Rosa cried openly, holding her daughter tightly. Years of struggle, sacrifice, and quiet endurance had led to this moment. Adrian received the news from the manager and felt a deep sense of satisfaction mixed with humility. He did not celebrate publicly. Instead, he reflected privately on how a single careless laugh could have ended this story before it began. He resolved to carry that lesson forward. The scholarship meant Lena would need to move temporarily, leaving her mother and the club behind. The decision was painful but necessary. Rosa encouraged her to go, promising they would manage. The night before Lena left, she played one last piece at the club not as a guest, but as someone who belonged. The audience listened with understanding and respect. Adrian stood at the back of the room, not in the spotlight, knowing that his role in her journey was now complete. Lena walked off the stage that night carrying gratitude rather than fear, ready to step into a future shaped by effort, not limitation. Time passed in quieter ways after Lena left for her scholarship, but the changes she set in motion continued to shape the lives she touched. In the new city, Lena faced challenges that humbled her again. She was no longer the surprising talent from nowhere. She was one of many gifted students, each carrying their own stories and strengths. At first, the comparison felt heavy, but she reminded herself that she did not need to be the best, only to be honest in her work. She studied hard, practiced longer hours, and learned to accept criticism without losing confidence. There were moments of loneliness, nights when she missed her mother deeply, but music became her anchor. It connected her to home, to purpose, to the girl who once stood trembling beside a piano asking for a chance. Slowly, her instructors began to notice not just her skill, but her depth and consistency. Rosa adjusted to life without her daughter at home. The apartment felt quieter but also peaceful. She continued working at the club for a while, then gradually reduced her hours as her health improved. She carried pride with her everywhere, not loudly but steadily. When people asked about Lena, she spoke simply, letting the truth stand on its own. Adrian continued running the club, but it was no longer just a symbol of status to him. He introduced programs to support young artists from difficult backgrounds, quietly changing the culture of the place. He listened more, judged less, and remembered how easily he could have missed something extraordinary. The memory of that first laugh stayed with him, not as guilt, but as a reminder to pause before dismissing anyone. Years later, Lena returned to the city for a public concert, invited not as a curiosity, but as a respected performer. The venue was larger than the club, the audience broader, the stakes higher. Rosa sat in the front row, hands clasped, eyes shining. Adrian attended as well, sitting among the crowd, unnoticed and content with that. When Lena played, her music carried everything she had lived through. There was no bitterness in it, only clarity and strength. The applause was long and genuine. After the performance, Lena found her mother first, then later spotted Adrian in the crowd. Their eyes met briefly. No words were needed. The journey had spoken for itself. Lena understood then that her story was not about proving anyone wrong, but about choosing courage when fear was easier. Adrian understood that influence meant responsibility, and Rosa understood that love, quiet and steady, could change the direction of a life. The girl who once asked to play for her sick mother no longer needed permission. She had earned her voice, and she carried it forward, not forgetting where it began and never underestimating the power of being seen at the right moment. The final chapter of this story unfolded quietly rather than dramatically, just as real life often does. Lena did not become famous overnight, and her name did not flood headlines, but her life changed in steady, meaningful ways. She continued performing, teaching younger students, and growing into her own sound. Music was no longer only a way to survive. It became a way to give back, especially to those who reminded her of herself. Rosa eventually left her cleaning job for good. Her health improved enough that she could rest without fear, and she filled her days volunteering at a community center where children gathered after school. She spoke gently about her daughter when asked, never exaggerating, never claiming credit, simply proud of the woman Lena had become. Her love had always been quiet and constant, and it had carried them both through their hardest years. Adrian changed too, though fewer people noticed at first. He became known less for his sharp words and more for his fairness. Employees felt seen rather than invisible. Young artists found space rather than judgment. The club evolved into a place where opportunity and dignity mattered as much as wealth. Adrian never spoke publicly about the night he laughed, but he never forgot it either. That moment stayed with him as a reminder that power without empathy was empty. Years later, Lena returned one final time to the club, not to perform, but to attend a small gathering celebrating a new scholarship program for young musicians from struggling families. Adrian had named it quietly without ceremony. Rosa stood beside her daughter, holding her hand, both of them aware of how unlikely this moment once seemed. Adrian addressed the room briefly. He spoke about listening, about humility, and about how talent does not announce itself with status. He did not mention names or stories, but Lena understood. So did Rosa. When the gathering ended, Adrian approached them both. He thanked Rosa for her strength and thanked Lena for her courage. This time there was no distance between them. As they parted, Lena felt something settle inside her, a sense of completion. She realized that her journey was never about changing one man or proving her worth. It was about choosing to step forward even when laughter stood in the way. It was about a mother who kept going when no one noticed, and a girl who refused to stay silent when it mattered most. The city continued its rhythm, full of noise and ambition, but somewhere within it lived a truth that could not be undone. A single moment of courage had reshaped 3 lives and quietly touched many more. The question that once sounded small and desperate had become a turning point. Can I play for my sick mother? The answer had never truly belonged to the millionaire. It belonged to the girl who asked, the woman who believed, and the choice to listen instead of dismiss. And that choice echoed forward long after the music ended. Long after the music ended.